All right, welcome everybody. Let's get some of this administrative stuff out of the way. Approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes from the last meeting? And are there any corrections or changes or other things we need to address? We're good to go. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Make a motion.
Clear will second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, good. Do we want to start right in now with Fenimore? Okay, go ahead. Tammy, why don't you give us an update?
Well, thank you, Mary. First of all, I want to start off talking about Fenimore Woods, and I just want to give a thank you to the board, of course, Parks and Recreation Board, Board of Commissioners, and all the residents who've been hanging in here with us on this project. Hard to believe it started back in 2016. So we've been traveling a long road, and we've heard a lot of really great information over the last several years. We've had good opportunity to have solid community involvement. Hearing from the public, the neighbors, and many, many other folks that have been involved in the project. We had this project come back to the Parks and Recreation Board back in September 2021 and spent about a year diving into lots of special meetings, public meetings, focused meetings, roundtable meetings along the way throughout much of 2021 and 2022. Then some determinations were made in September 2022 with a list of recommendations of some items that were deemed priorities in terms of a redesign of the project. We know we have two consultants that got involved in the project. One specifically to come back and do a concept design of the stable to renovate it so that it could be used for bathrooms and storage. And then, of course, our Parks Comprehensive Plan developer, engineer, came back to put together a proposal on a comprehensive pieces of the park. Of course, those that didn't include the stable, so the two would work hand in hand with one another. We have spent much of the fall going through the details of those proposals. Myself and the township engineer, Steve Norsini, we've had much back and forth with them, and just starting to, towards the end of 2022, wrap up those proposals and get a really solid understanding for what those were going to cost. I know we talked in December about the anticipated costs coming in relative to the budget that we know remains on the project. And I think where we are right now is seeing that there is potential that's likely that there wouldn't be enough remaining funding to be able to construct the project once we conducted those designs. So design work for both of those pieces seemed to be definitely taking up a big chunk of the budget, bringing us down to the point where we don't want to put the Board of Commissioners in a situation where we bid this project already knowing it may come in well over budget. So what we'd like to do as the administration is provide the commissioners, when this gets to them, a really solid understanding of all the costs in various scenarios. We know the priority is the preservation of the stable. We're certainly going to make sure that that one is well included in detail, but also feel prudent to give them a look at this with a demolition of the stable as well as a prefabricated bathroom that would be renovated and placed within the park, similar to a bathroom that you might see in one of our other park locations like Philippone or like O'Connor, as you've seen those there. And possibly some other options as well. Just so they have a comprehensive view and a menu of what all of that will look like, so they can, we'll give them a recommendation, what we think could work, but we want them to see all of those costs. So right now, that's what we're doing. We're working on all of those details, so we can come back to them and give them a really solid menu of cost options on all of the pieces of the project that include, as we know, taking a look at the parking lots, making sure that those are renovated, of course, so that they can provide the ADA that's needed to get to the various amenities, including what would possibly be the stable and or a bathroom, the pavilion structure, recognizing that that does need serious renovation and replacement. And then, of course, the corresponding ADA that goes along with that. The playground, looking at it in a scenario of not only replacement, but if we kept it in place, what would the ADA look like to that? The lower parking lot, in terms of the reconfiguration, we know, and moving the entrance drive up, something that was deemed, I know, important to the project, and not only that, but renovating that parking lot, and of course, providing the ADA access down below. So that's a snap, down by the pond. So I know that's just a snapshot, but those are part of a long list of the other renovations I know that we want to have happen as part of the park. And make sure that the Board of Commissioners are in a good position to look at those numbers relative to the 1.6 million that we know is left, to see if it can work. I know, we want to make sure that, we don't put a project out to bid that we already know could be destined to fail. So we want to have a good recommendation in front of them, a nice menu of cost options for them. That way, when they take a look at it along with us, we can make a good decision and recommendation on how we're going to move forward. So that's where we're teeing up to get to. We're hoping to do that in March. That's the schedule we're on, and that's what we're looking to do in terms of providing them with that information and hoping to have a viable plan to where we can keep moving this great project forward. We know we've got a lot of renovations we need to make there. A lot of folks in the community are excited about it. They're looking forward to it, and keep this project moving.
Thanks, Tammy. Anybody on the board have any comment, input? I'm happy to take public comment if there is any on this specific issue while folks are here, because we're going to switch over to our informational Zoom session on Bishop Richard Allen at exactly 7 o'clock. So if there was any input from anyone in the audience, if not, that's fine too.
Michael Kearney, 124 Walnut Avenue. I basically have a couple of questions. Is the proposal to take these options to the commissioners without first having a public meeting here with the Parks and Recreation Board to go through it? Or is there going to be another meeting where we could basically hear what the options are, hear the commissioners discuss it, and then discuss the possibility and what their recommendations might be?
We were planning to take it to the Board of Commissioners so we could keep the project moving. And the public would be involved, Parks and Recreation Board members would be involved by being able to attend, but in order to keep the project moving, that was our goal, is to take it to them. I know they are waiting for it. I know we have bond dollars that are at stake in terms of this project. So in the interest of timing, I think in September, the Parks and Recreation Board did their job that we asked them to do, and now it's time to get a recommendation and move forward.
Okay, so when you said you would make a recommendation, that is the Parks and Recreation Department will be making a recommendation?
No, we're going to be putting it together relative to the list of priorities that the Parks and Recreation Board made, and then internally, our township manager, myself, and our engineer are going to look at those numbers and give a recommendation to our board.
You were right.
So, okay, yes, okay. And one other thing, you mentioned the high priority of the stables, which of course for me is a priority, but you didn't mention the trees again, and that just sort of, that jumped out as...
No, it's on the list, sorry.
No, I understand. I just want to make absolutely sure
Absolutely.
that that priority, which has been the first priority from the very beginning, continues to be emphasized.
Thank you.
Doug McCone, 216 Poplar. Question, do we have are there any like preliminary concepts at this point, drawings that, showing the different options? Or is that, we haven't even gotten that far yet?
We had a presentation by Gannett Fleming back in July.
I remember that.
And they showed those options for the
Okay.
stable.
And that's,
So we're basing, when we take a look at these numbers, based on what they presented, there were two options. There was one where there was an outfit of the stable and the storage option, and then there was one that had a recreational
more.
gathering space within it. When this was moved on from the Parks Board, it was the lower cost option,
of course,
which was the $834,000 option.
lower but not cheap.
Lower but not the cheapest.
Thank you
Or
very
lower
much.
but the cheapest.
Thank you.
And now, just to kind of chime into that too, though, is that now that we've gotten the design fees for that, we know those costs are escalating. Not only one, based on the increases of the design fees from what we were shown conceptually in July of 2022, but now what we're understanding in terms of construction.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Higgins, 603 South Evan Avenue. Thanks for spending a lot of time with us again. I just had a question about, I think the last time we had a meeting, the gentleman from the other group was going to go and research, come up with a design concept feasibility study of, I think, a pathway down to the pavilion. And then that was back in maybe September, October, and then he was supposed to come back with a preliminary plan of what that would cost. That was at the last Parks and Rec meeting that we talked about Fenimore.
I
Do you
don't know,
mean
Tammy,
Gilmore?
I'm not aware of that, and there's been no direction given to our, I assume you're referencing our consulting firm that did the original design.
Yeah. Am I making this up? I think, Tammy, you weren't here. You were out. And the gentleman, I wish I had my
Kevin
notes.
Selger from Gilmore and Associates
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
here
they
with
were
our
gonna-
engineer, Steve Norsini, at that September meeting.
Yeah, like he took the
2022.
list of the priorities with him, and I think he got, the next step was to get the commissioners to sign off on him coming up with a new design. And then we were going to be called back for the follow-up to that, and they said around March, and I'm just wondering what happened with that.
Right, so that's the proposal that we got, so it would be a redesign of the park based on the priorities that were put forth by the board. So those were the proposals that we had received leading up to the end of 2022. But it was a
those were-
comprehensive look at the park,
Yeah.
and the new priority scheme versus just a walkway
Yes,
portion.
that's right. Yes, that's right. But unless I'm wrong, I thought that this was going to be brought to be reviewed by Parks and Rec, his plan, and to get our response to what he came up with.
So, Mr. Higgins, I remember that meeting because that was the one that I ended up
Oh, okay, no wonder, I'm
sharing. Unfortunately, we lost all of the audio to that meeting. So and I had whatever notes I had, we shared with Tammy and we went through it. As I remember it, was Mr. Kevin, we had gone through all of our priorities
Yeah.
and had made a list of, like, these are really our priorities.
That's right. You
And
led that, yeah.
is that correct?
Yeah,
Is that how you
that's
remember?
that's what you led, and you wrote it down, and then you
We
gave
let
him his
it- let
marching
it,
orders. Like,
And then we sent him with those. And
That's right.
was Mr. Norsini here that night as well? I don't.
He
I think
was.
so, yeah.
He was?
He was.
And that they sort of came up with this idea that, yes, these would be the priorities that we would be working with. I don't remember him, now I don't remember him saying, I'm going to come back with you with a drawing. I think he just was kind of tasked to be like, here are our priorities. Does this fit into with what's already been done? Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, I think he was going to come back to you and get public reaction, or just, feedback on his plan. And then that just we just thought it was, and then he said it could take many months, and we're like, that's fine.
Right, right.
And then we thought that's what tonight was, that he was coming back here to
Yeah,
present a sketch of what it was before it went to get your blessing before it went to see the commissioners see it.
The way the motion was written is that we would come back and we would provide updates to you moving forward, based on how it's moving on to the commissioners. That's how we were operating.
Consultant with Kevin, right? Is that how you were?
Well, Kevin was going to go back and start putting the plan together.
Helping with.
And as we've moved down the road, we've updated you. So along the way in the fall, I've tried to update you and keep you abreast of everything that's been going on relative to the proposal development, which has obviously been a lot of back and forth with he and Gannett Fleming. So right now, there's no plan that has put together because it requires authorization by the Board of Commissioners before he can even get started. So what I'm trying to say is before they even get started and we ask the board to commit that money to him as well as Gannett Fleming, we need to take a step back and really look at the budget, because to spend the money, we need to look at all the pieces. Because right now, with the amount of money and the balance that we're working with, it just doesn't seem likely that the project can get done.
So did he or did he not come back with like a conceptual design about ADA and whether or not the path could get down there? Remember, he was going to research the rise and run and all that stuff.
What Mr. Renfrey wrote the proposal, and we tried to piece that together, right? And that's the only surviving thing.
Correct.
And I, maybe you remember it differently.
Yeah, I recall it being more in the possible of what they
Right.
could do rather than a commitment, because I think, as Tammy said, I don't think we're not in a position to commit to that.
Right.
And I think what we did was come up with the priorities, and if I understand the process from here, and Tammy, I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's an effort to take those priorities, which were part of our motion, attach dollar figures to them, present them as a menu-type item in basically conceptual form to the Board of Commissioners, at which time the Board of Commissioners will take action or not on any number of those items. From there, then there has to be design work done, correct?
Yes.
And then
at that
presumably that
point,
would then see the light of day in the public.
Come
Yes,
back
back
to
at the
us.
Parks and Recreation
Right.
Board.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't what you think it is.
Okay,
We
so
haven't
we're-
started to
you're not-
design
you're
it yet. We haven't started any design
Right.
yet
No, I
because of
didn't-
the cost of
I
what those
didn't-
proposals
I
are
didn't really interpret it as a
requiring
design.
authorization.
It was more like a conceptual, kind of like I think you used the word like a feasibility analysis of whether or not we could get down there without doing this long serpentine path down to the, I thought that's what it was, which we still don't have any information on, because that's a major factor here. If we can't get down without a serpentine to that pavilion, which would cause the destruction of a lot of mature trees, then do we even want a pavilion? Remember, we were kind of stuck on that issue, like, if we can't get there without cutting down trees, then let's move the pavilion up top. And I'm just wondering, it's been many months and we don't really have any more data on that.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm looking at my notes here from that meeting, and
Yeah.
I know it was, we were discussing that. I have notes here about making sure that we were ADA compliant, and I
Yeah.
know the board that adopted that in their last meeting. I think what we're trying to say here is, we're not at that point yet that you're
Okay.
trying to get us
Okay.
to right now.
Okay.
We still need to get the see what the studies are, or what the bookend,
Budget.
what we can do in the budget, and then put that sort of in a mixing bowl and then come back with it. But this is not going to be done under the, this is going to get railroaded. You guys are going to have your opportunity to
Right.
have some feedback on
Okay.
this.
Yeah, I just think, just like an opportunity for the public to look at the price tags and prioritize knowing that we're over budget, what the most important things are, and have a say, like, nobody wants a brand-new park there if it's at the expense of cutting down trees. We just want to keep everything the same. It's preservation, not brand spanking new. So,
And one of the top things, I'm sorry, written into the proposal is that
Okay.
no trees would be sacrificed as a result of it. So in our proposal with Gilmore and Associates, that was one thing that we made very explicit.
okay,
These are all things we're going to have to balance, ADA compliance, the
Right.
tree cover, all these things, which I know
Yep.
everyone's very concerned about, so, and that's going to be subject to future meetings.
okay. Thanks so much for your time and answering all the questions. I appreciate it.
Mr. Higgins, I'd like to just add that in reference to that, I think it's really important that it gets in front of the Board of Commissioners sooner than later so that we can get you involved, all residents involved. So it's not just stuck here in Parks and Rec.
Okay.
Wanted to move forward.
Do you agree?
Oh, we wanted to move forward, absolutely.
Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate it.
And as
Plus,
soon
there-
as we set the date, sorry for that meeting, we will make sure that everyone on the coalition is emailed so that they're aware, so they can come out to talk about the project.
Thank you.
Plus, I think we recognize the limited resources, I should say limited at $1.6 million, but in a comparative sense, they're limited resources versus priorities. A plus B plus C might not equal that, it might exceed that, and that's all part of the process. And I think we've been trying to get to a priorities, what the community wants, and then trying to get it more concrete to be able to get in a position to pick and choose, or have the Board of Commissioners, I say, pick and choose, and we're getting closer to that, which is good. But then, when the i's are dotted and t's are crossed in the designs, we have to come back here and do it again, and that's the process, right? Sorry.
Doug McCone again at 216 Poplar. Maybe I created this confusion because Michael came up with a thing using the geographic, cross lines, and he came up with a system by which it's kind of circuitous, but he could get in complete compliance with that from all the way from the top thing all the way down to the playground and all that kind of stuff. And I had gone out there with an actual measurement and measured it, and we are able to do it along the lines he has with a couple of minor tweaks. Because I said that and we showed a sort of a thing, that could be what Mr. Higgins was looking at. But I apologize for not sending something earlier.
No, it's all right.
It's a collaborative effort.
Thanks again.
Yeah, the last thing you want is this stuff with us.
We still have a little time.
You have 6 minutes.
Michael Kearney again. This is a question that I don't think you have to answer tonight, but I'm hoping the board will keep it in the back of your mind that would you or would you not at some point be willing to support a request for additional funds to meet priorities? You don't have to answer that now, but that's a question that I would want, if I were on the board, that's what I would want to consider, because I don't know what the delta is between what the shortfall is between the 1.6 million that remains and what the various options are. So I hope you would at least consider asking for that, or in the future, just again, based on the priorities and how important they are to the community as a whole.
Thank you. Anything else?
Sorry, one last thing. Will you guys be able to express your opinion to the commissioners about what you feel are the priorities? Or will they be kind of looking at the price tags and, making, or are we going to have this kind of, outspokenness, for lack of a better word, to them as if and they're in a silo and they don't know how the public has already expressed what we want? Am I making sense? Like, shouldn't you make recommendations about what the priorities are? Will they know, or are they going to go into this blind?
No, I'll be providing that to them.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Tammy, do you think you have time to maybe squeeze in 1 or 2 reports before we switch over to Richard Allen?
I can. I'm going to give an announcement just on some of the upcoming great events that we have that'll be happening and taking place. So, for instance, this Friday night, we already have the 12th annual Sweetheart Dance over at the Inn at Villanova University, which is really exciting. We have 275 guests that are planning. We want to take an opportunity to thank the Villanova Inn for hosting us. And we do have a hearty wait list, no pun intended. So we wish we could take more, but we just don't have the space to accommodate it. So I want to thank the staff for all of their planning, and we have a great night ahead of us tomorrow night. We also have the Bishop Richard Allen Park wreath-laying ceremony that's going to be coming up next Tuesday at 3 o'clock p.m. I know originally it was advertised at 1 o'clock p.m. It is at 3 o'clock p.m., so we want to make sure that that's clear. And excited about the event again, of course. It's always a really awesome little event that takes place at the park. Hopefully this year we'll have a little bit nicer weather. We're usually all bundled up and cold, and I know with the weather we've been having recently, probably a good option where we may. We also are working on a graphic informational panel about Bishop Richard Allen that we anticipate could potentially be unveiled in June. So stay tuned for more information on that. That is a project that's underway and currently in revisions and drafts for what it would look like. We have another pickleball tournament coming up on St. Patrick's Day. In March. We have our annual teen flashlight egg hunt along the Radnor Trail coming up again in March. And then we also have, starting on March 1st, we have registration opening for the 26th annual Youth Trout Derby over at Sawmill Park. So long tenured event, of course, and always a wait list that happens for that one. So registration will open at 9 a.m. on March 1st. So a lot of great things happening. Amazing that a lot of these events are pushing so many years and great traditions. Lastly, I just want to announce Radnor Conservancy and the Bird Town are hosting a Getting Ready for the Backyard Bird Count event that's going to take place actually this Saturday at the Radnor Memorial Library at 9:30 a.m. So they asked me to make that announcement so we could share that with the public. And as always, there's a wealth of activities for everyone going on. We have things posted at the website, lots of information going out in our e-newsletter. If folks aren't signed up for it, please go ahead and sign up for it. A lot of information every week. And then social media handles as well. Lots of information being put out on a daily basis. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. But a lot of really great things happening and on the horizon.
Great. It all sounds great. Thanks, Tammy. Looks like we're getting close. Did you want to do an introduction to this presentation, Tammy? And hopefully the mechanics will work out for us.
Sure. So we're going to be switching over to a Zoom here momentarily. We have an informational session on Bishop Richard Allen, who is definitely our great namesake of Brook Street Park that I believe had a grand opening back in 2010. It was right before I came in the role here. I didn't unfortunately have a chance to attend, but I know it was a great event, seeing some of the pictures. So the Willows Park Preserve is hosting an informational session tonight that's going to be hosted by Reverend Carolyn Cavanis, who is Reverend over at the AME Church of Ardmore. They've been our annual partner for the Bishop Richard Allen wreath laying. So she's going to host some information about him to provide some history and hope folks understand a little bit more about who he was and the impact he made here on Radnor. So with that, I'll let Ian go ahead and switch us over to the Zoom.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in about a minute or two. Okay, I'm going to keep an eye on the waiting room, but I think we can get started. I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Will Nord. I'm the executive director at the Willows Park Preserve. We are a young nonprofit located in Villanova in the Willows Park. Our goal is to restore and maintain and operate the Willows Mansion for community use. A number of years ago, Radnor Township was deciding whether to tear the Willows Mansion down or not, and couldn't figure out what to do with the space. And so our nonprofit formed in response to that. A big goal, besides restoring a big old home that was neglected for 7+ years, is to provide the community with a variety of educational programming and events. We love to partner and collaborate with local individuals and organizations. And we're really excited this evening to partner with Reverend Caroline, who is the pastor at Bethel AME Church in Ardmore. And she's going to teach us a little bit more about Bishop Richard Allen. And we're really excited about learning more about him and his impact on the area and specifically Radnor. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Reverend Carolyn. And thank you very much.
Sure thing, sure thing, sure thing. So, good evening, everyone. And very grateful to have this time to share and to dialogue about Bishop Richard Allen and certainly his connection and the impact of his walk in 1784 to Radnor. So by way of introduction, because I think it's important to place ourselves in context, and we all have a story, we all have a narrative, we all, in fact, may also just be putting together the pieces of who and what we are. My name is Reverend Carolyn Cavanis, and I'm the pastor of Bethel AME Church of Ardmore, and we have been on our plot of land since 1895, and the church this year will celebrate 128 years of ministry and placement in the South Ardmore community. And also this year, we commemorate and remember the fire wherein the church literally burned to the ground on February 18th, 1973, during a morning worship service. And we, in fact, and why these stories are so important, and even what we're doing tonight is because we want to keep the story going and cataloging. And so to recall the stories of some of our members who remember that day. It was a cold February day, and there was some heat coming up from the radiators. And the pastor at the time, Reverend Dr. Donald Tucker, who's still alive, lives in Shreveport, Louisiana. He's like, "Oh, just stop it. It's just the heat. It's just the heat." And I said, "No, Reverend, this is not just heat. This is a fire." And they were on that Sunday able to escort all the children, everyone who was present, out safely. And all that remained was the frame and the cross on the high altar. The church rebuilt, and where we are today, this is a kind of a from the back front view, and so you'll see the amazing beams wherein the church rebuilt in 1975, and we continue to forge forward. And so, in addition to being a faith institution, we are also very much committed to community outreach, and also are on the front line of community gardening. So I guess we could talk about that too one day, about land and food sovereignty and food empowerment. So let's journey together. And Will, would it be possible to record? Because I know we have some friends that might be interested later on in this. So before we, in centering again,
Recording in progress.
that there are stories behind all of our, even if we were to think about Willows Park Preserve, the stories and the land acknowledgement. And so this notion and the story of Richard Allen and his presence on the main line also has unearthed some gems and stories and persons' names that we would not, otherwise would not know. So sometimes I think as we're passing by places, we see a gas station or we see a home or we see some historic site, but who lived there? What was life like then? And how can we put that in context with even in our current stories and telling? So Bishop Richard Allen was born a slave. His birthday is 5 days away, recorded to be February 14th, born in Philadelphia in 1760. Growing up, the picture that you see here is the picture that was, that this is an old gentleman. And so I grew up like, okay, he was an old guy and he did these amazing things. When in fact, as we go through a chronology of some key milestones in his life, he was under 30 years old. So this is really probably not the picture that should be shown. This is him as an elder statesman, but this is a young man who, sold at this Stokely Sturgis in Dover, Delaware in 1768. He was converted to Methodism at the age of 17. And in his Life and Labors, his autobiography, he recalls that conversion experience that I cried to the Lord both day and night. And all of a sudden, my dungeon shook, my chains flew off, and glory to God, I cried. And so very much a spiritual deliverance, very much, again, feeling liberated, and to think about these words coming from an enslaved man, okay, at 17 years old. So having that experience, but also from that, very much in his slave owner, allowing him to have interaction and to have a relationship with the itinerant preachers of the Methodist movement. And so the Methodist movement, Methodist denomination, is at its centerfold the traveling preachers, right? The itinerant preachers who are traveling the gospel. And so the fact that Sturgis here, his slave owner, would even allow the persons that he enslaved to have a relationship with a religious practice and to, take part in, says a lot about him as an owner, but also that was the point of liberation for Richard Allen. So from that point, he would then, in 1783, go and purchase his freedom for 2,000 continental dollars. And he would then return to Philadelphia, Old City as we know it, and would be a member of the St. George's Church. And so through the work of Richard Newman, if you ever have a chance, Freedom's Prophet, which has really, certainly has also lifted up the religious stature of Richard Allen. It also points out that he was very much a mover and a shaker as it relates to the African-American community, the Negro community, as it was busting at the seams in Philadelphia. Richard Newman records that Richard Allen could be found in the first White House, that he's, cleaning the chimneys. So imagine the conversations. We imagine the access that he's given, right? That he's, people probably aren't thinking he's listening, but he's listening. He's a landowner. He's also a preacher. So he was not given the main, time slot to preach. He would preach early in the morning and would have persons Black Philadelphia coming out to hear Richard Allen. That his, religious community would be St. George's Methodist Church. St. George's would themselves also be busting at the seams. In fact, would have to go about a capital campaign, if you will, as we would say, to add the balcony area, which was financed by their Black membership. However, this is, kind of stomp up because we're declaring and sharing together, but also there's even separation even within a religious institution. And so here arrives 1784. So this is a 24-year-old Richard Allen, and he recalls his experience walking to Radnor. And so hear with me Richard Allen's words. In the year 1784, I left East Jersey and labored in Pennsylvania. I walked until my feet became so sore and blistered the first day that I scarcely could bear them to the ground. I found the people very humane and kind in Pennsylvania. Having but little money, I stopped at Caesar Waters at Radnor Township, 12 miles from Philadelphia. I found him and his wife very kind and affectionate to me. In the evening, they asked me if I would come and take tea with them, but after sitting a while, my feet became so sore and painful that I could scarcely be able to put them to the floor. I told them that I would accept of their kind invitation, but my feet pained me so that I could not come to the table. They brought the table to me. Never was I more kindly received by strangers that I had never before seen than by them. She bathed my feet with warm water and bran. The next morning, my feet were better and free from pain. They asked me if I could preach for them. I preached for them the next evening. We had a glorious meeting. They invited me to stay till Sabbath day and preach for them. I agreed to do so and preached on Sabbath day to a large congregation of different persuasions. And my dear Lord was with me, and I believe there were many souls cut to the heart and were added to the ministry. They insisted on me to longer stay with them. I stayed and labored in Radnor several weeks. Many souls were awakened and cried aloud to the Lord to have mercy upon them. I was frequently called upon by many inquiring what they should do to be saved. I appointed them to prayer and supplication at the throne of grace, and to make use of all manner of prayer, and pointed them to the invitation of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who has said, "Come unto me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Glory be to God, and now I know he was a God at hand and left not afar off. I preached my farewell sermon and left these dear people. It was a time of visitation from above. Many were slain of the Lord. Seldom did I ever experience such a time of mourning and lamentation among a people. There were but few colored people in the neighborhood. The most of my congregation was white. Some said, "This man must be a man of God. I've never heard such preaching before." We spent a great part of the night in singing and prayer with mourners. I expected I should have had to walk, as I had done before. But Mr. Davis had a creature that he made a present to me, but I intended to pay him for his horse if I ever got able. My dear Lord was kind and gracious to me. Some years after, I got into business and thought myself able to pay for the horse. The horse was too light and small for me to travel on far. I traded away with George Huffman for a blind horse, but larger. I found my friend Huffman very kind and affectionate to me and his family also. I preached several times at Huffman's meeting house to a large and numerous congregation. So there's a couple of things that are happening here, right? So one, that Richard Allen bears the name and gives us the name of Caesar Waters, and I'll speak to him, and we want to also lift up his wife's name of Phoebe. So Caesar and Phoebe Waters. Also that, Allen lifts up Radnor, right? So we have a sense of location, but also the extravagant hospitality that he is met with. The image of, they brought the table to me. And that this was just supposed to be a short-term stay, but it ends up being several weeks. And how this actually stood out to me tonight in a way of never before, is when he talks about there were but few colored people in the neighborhood. The most of my congregation was white. So he's building. I mean, this is, remember, a 24-year-old Allen, okay? This is a year post his buying his freedom and relocating to Philadelphia. Here he has an image of persons of mixed persuasions being able to interact, get along, hear the gospel message, and respond. And not wanting to let him go. They don't want him to leave. They don't want him to leave. They want him to stay. And he comes on foot and he leaves, okay, with this creature, okay? And to think about this image in the midst of all of certainly with the challenges of race relations and the challenges of just, of journeying through life, right? That even in 1784, there was, if you will, this community that existed here, okay? And so here arrives, bringing to the forefront 227 Brook Street, the home of Caesar and Phoebe Waters. And in fact, we, through records, we in fact spell Phoebe's name per the slave deed, Phebe, Caesar and Phoebe Waters. So how do we arrive? In present day is the Bishop Richard Allen Park I'll show, but it's a basketball court. Who lived there? What was going on there before? Okay, and thus how we have been able, through research, which I will share in a moment, arrive that this was the place where, when Richard Allen made that walk, it was to, if it had an address then, but the address that we know it today, 227 Brook Street, the home of Caesar and Phoebe Waters. Caesar and Phoebe Waters were a free Black couple who were some of the first Black landowners in Radnor Township. Though he lived in this space as a free man, Caesar Waters was enslaved by a wealthy white politician and lawyer named Charles Humphreys for the majority of his life. I placed Charles Humphrey's picture as he was part of that First Continental Congress. And there's been some today, I was reading something today as to how would Richard Allen have known to go to Caesar and Phoebe's house? Well, I'm kind of speculating that given if Richard had some access in that first, that maybe Charles Humphreys told him about the Waters. Somebody had to have directed him to that home, okay? We know very little bit about Phoebe Waters, but we know that she was also enslaved in the Philadelphia area. Charles Humphreys owned over 100 acres of land in Radnor, Haverford, Lower Marion Township. In fact, I believe one of the early names of Oregon was Humphreyville. Okay, and with his sisters, Elizabeth and Rebecca, they enslaved 9 Black people. These enslaved people were Nanny, a Black woman, Nancy, a Black woman, Dolly, a biracial woman, Thomas Crail, a Black man, Judy Miller, a biracial woman, Caesar Waters, a Black man, Alice, a biracial girl, Tommy, a biracial boy, and Fanny, a biracial girl. These enslaved people had difficult and traumatic lives, but resisted enslavement in many different ways. They tried to survive in harsh conditions by taking care of themselves and each other. Charles Humphreys enslaved Caesar Waters from 1700s until 1786 when Charles Humphrey died. In his will, Humphreys freed Caesar Waters, Thomas Crail, Nanny, and Judy Miller. Notice, did not free Phoebe. He gave them some money, some objects, and land to Caesar, Thomas, and Judy. That is now the space of this park. He also wrote that his estate executors were to build Thomas and Judy a log house with a stone chimney. Though he coupled Thomas and Judy together in his will, Thomas and Judy had relationships with other people. Thomas with a woman named Effie, and Judy with a man named James. It is likely that Caesar and Phoebe also lived in this type of log house. The Waters couples eventually had a daughter named Charlotte. And here is the backdrop upon this visit that Bishop Allen makes in 1784. And how he writes about this visit, which was in 1784, 2 years before Caesar was legally freed by Charles Humphreys. It's possible that Caesar and Phoebe were living in this space even though Caesar was still enslaved when Allen visited. It is clear from historical record that they lived in this space with their daughter to at least 1829. Allen dies in 1860. Today, we can honor the lives of the enslaved and free Black people who call this space home. And we remember, we say these names: Richard Allen, Caesar, Phoebe, Charlotte, Thomas, Effie, Judy, James, Nanny, Nancy, Dolly, Alice, Fanny, and Tommy. So to think about that Brook Street 227 was where this very, and Allen says, right, it was a very small colored community. And that these were persons who were directly tied with the enslaved persons of Charles Humphreys. And so when we see sites, public institutions, what was life like for persons who lived there, right? Who were those people's names? What were their stories? And so I also want to give credit to Colin McCrossin, who is a history student at Villanova University, who's been a phenomenal resource. It might be a great person to have him to come to, because he's been doing a lot of work around the backdrop, if you will, of public institutions and parks and different areas here on the main line. And so in 2018, our congregation commissioned Willis Humphrey, no pun intended, one of the great, in fact, Willis passed away at the age of 44. He was a part of the Philadelphia Mural Arts Project. We commissioned for him to tell the story of Richard Allen's walk to Radnor. And what was it? I recall many of the conversations with Willis, whose artistic work is under the name of Nomo, to place the story, which is one of his motifs of his work, in the face of Richard Allen. And so the topography, if you will, the face, this sketch of Richard Allen is is actually the first, and it's in the Schomburg, and this was a portrait of Richard Allen in 1784. Okay, so found that this is as probably, a young Richard versus, if you will, an old Richard when this story takes place. And so you see the blistered feet and how that is interpreted by Willis. And then we see the coming to the home of the Waters, right? And here's Phoebe washing his feet, and maybe Caesar engaged in a conversation, and maybe that's little Charlotte, okay. And then his preaching to the crowd of mixed persuasions. So we can see by the dark or light faces, the mixed persuasions. And then if you see in the little corner, there is Richard returning back to Philadelphia on that little creature. So it's a beautiful piece. It's very stunning. But look at the story as it's being told. And this is a young Richard. Richard Newman suggests that Richard Allen's this journey, this stop, this time he spent in Radnor was formative, because this is 1784 before November 1787, which is deemed as the Great Walk, the first act of civil disobedience, the Great Walkout that takes place at the St. George's United Methodist Church in November 1787. So maybe this world, this community that Richard engaged, and I think it's okay to suggest that he stayed in touch with Radnor in this community, right? This was not a one and done kind of, he had to have come and taken trips or sent people this way, okay? And that this served as the impetus for November 1787. So at the top here, I have this is the Richard Allen stamp, which was commissioned by the United States Postal Service in 2016 upon the bicentennial of the AME Church in 2016. And then also Absalom Jones, who was the first Black Episcopal priest, and the St. Thomas Episcopal Church. In fact, his feast day was last week, okay, Absalom Jones. November 1787, here is Absalom Jones and Richard Allen, a young Richard Allen, 27 years old, sitting in worship. Persons go down to the altar to pray. A few of the trustees of St. George's Church start, literally manhandling. And Allen says, "Allow us to say our prayer and we will trouble you no more." They complete the prayer and walk out, and people follow them. And becomes the birth of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. However, before the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the denomination, there was the birth of the Free African Society, the first mutual aid, deemed, if you will, the resource, the way in which of the care and upkeep of Black people in Philadelphia and beyond. Jobs, burial insurance, cemeteries, okay? All kinds of merchant activity, creating Black empowerment, the notion of self-help, that we should be able to be under our own vine and fig tree. And it starts in a blacksmith shop. And then becomes the birth of Bethel Church, or as is deemed today, Mother Bethel, or Heaven's Gate. A stop on the Underground Railroad, a place of rescue, right? A place of a reunion, okay? Also, living true to Bethel in Genesis 27, wherein that's where Jacob has that encounter of Jacob's ladder, as we know it, right? Where heaven meets earth. So here are some present day photos of Mother Bethel Church located in 6th and Lombard. And it also holds the distinction of the longest held parcel of land by people of color in the United States of America. This is the 4th iteration of the church, because it kept growing, and they would just build again. But this is the latest format. And this is also an interior shot from the back balcony. Okay. To think about that, this is a place also where many of the great, great orators, right? So Frederick Douglass, okay, many of that would, and even to this current day, this is holy ground. And also it holds the remains of Bishop Richard Allen, his second wife, Sarah Allen, and also Morris Brown, the fourth bishop of the AME Church. So in 2016 was a really big year as the denomination celebrated its bicentennial. And one of the pieces that, and I'll show another piece that was also commissioned, was this Bishop Richard Allen statue, which is on the grounds of Mother Bethel. It was done by, and I forget her name, and she's since has passed away, African-American sculpture. In fact, she was known for quite a bit of work in New England area around Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. So this was commissioned by she, and then also it has a memorial brick garden there. Also of note, want to lift up Richard Allen and Absalom Jones' response to the yellow fever in 1793. And but for, it is suggested, but for their efforts and literally turning Mother Bethel, if you will, into a place of refuge, there would have been more casualties as it relates to the yellow fever. So in response to Benjamin Rush's call to mobilize the Black community, they saved, they buried, right? They treated, and so really taking on back to this notion of mutual aid and self-sufficiency and self-help. And so in 2009, through the efforts of Ann Cozy and Peggy Gaskins, who's in the blue here, 227 Brook Street was deemed and named the Bishop Richard Allen Park. I arrived here on the main line in 2014, and it would be in my doing some research as we were preparing Bethel to host our conference, about 85 churches here on the main line, where I stumbled across this history, and I'm like, wait, this should be a part, we should be talking about this. We should be, taking time to celebrate and continuing to tell this story. And then from that, we've met friends along the way. So how I have met. So this work that we shared about the lives of Phoebe and Caesar Waters, I don't know to the depth this was available or maybe even considered in 2009, but now we have it. And so in this picture here, to the right is Reverend Dr. Mark Tyler, who is the current pastor of Mother Bethel Church. And if you notice, there's a cross that he has adorning his neck. Let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit more. And I believe it was around 2007, 2008, there was a service of reconciliation with Mother Bethel and with St. George's Church. So the two congregations came together and worshiped at St. George's. And Reverend Al Davis, who was the pastor of St. George at the time, presented to Dr. Tyler this cross. These were the nails placed into a cross from those pews in the balcony. And, so to think about also the fact of keeping artifacts, this is at least, well over, okay. And so this is all was at the time the bishop of the district, Bishop Richard Franklin Norris, a native of Philadelphia, and now has since retired, and the pastor at the time of Bethel AME Church of Bryn Mawr, Reverend Carlos Bounds, and he now pastors one of our churches in Norristown. And so what has happened since that time, on Richard Allen's birthday or around it, and if snow doesn't get in the way, we have had a wreath laying ceremony, which this coming will be on Tuesday. And so I've collected an assortment of pictures. You see, this is in the snow, and I don't think, and here's another where it was a little frigid. We could tell by, and this is in COVID, okay, present. And here's another, okay. And so taking this as community opportunity to come together, but also we have also involved, in addition to our denomination, local town officials, the Township Rec, but also the Masons. And so the Prince Hall Masons considers and has Absalom Jones, Richard Allen, Prince Hall, I forgot the other gentleman, as the, if you will, the pillars of Prince Hall Masonry, which is the, if you will, the Black Masonry. And so they have also been a part of the celebration each year as well. And so here's a little flyer. And then I also wanted to lift up, so Willis and I in 2016 worked together. This is the Bishop Richard Allen mural, which adorns 3801 Market Street, owned by the First Episcopal District of the AME Church. And this was designed and installed again upon the bicentennial of the AME Church in 2016. And so you will see that it also lifts up key persons and personalities and the story. So here's that young Richard again. Here is Absalom Jones. Here is Henry McNeil Turner. That's Henry McNeil Turner. Jarena Lee, the first licensed preacher, female preacher in the AME Church. Also the iteration. So first Bethel, second Bethel, third Bethel, and here's the current day Bethel. Okay. Rosa Parks, who was a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, was a stewardess at one of our churches in Detroit, Michigan. But also never to forget the Ma'afa, the slave passage. Okay, and then also that we were founded, the AME Church founded in a blacksmith shop. Okay, so again, here is an older, that old portrait of Richard and Willis, placing in the key scenes and movements that take place. Also, you will see even the flag, because there was also the patriot, the unapologetic, being, patriotic, within the United States of America. Let's see. Yeah, those are the ones I'll point out. Okay. So again, just want to, for us to think about how this is an address, but it's more, there's more depth to it. There's more story to it. And how do we say these names, and how do we also embrace what is a complicated history? But also that, yes, this name, Bishop Richard Allen, but who is Bishop Richard Allen? And how does his story insight? How does his story excite us? How does his story, even as a challenge, as in considering our work of being the beloved community? So I would love to open up the line, would love if there are any thoughts, anything bubbling, any questions in our sharing this evening.
Hi, this is Kathy. I'm thoroughly enjoying the lecture, so thank you for that. And I know I've seen this sign for the park, but can't place it. Do you have a street on where the park is located?
Sure, Brook Street,
Oh,
227.
right. I'll have to
And
I'll
it's
have to
one of
Google
those
it.
very small kind of cul-de-sac, and it's and there's a small sign. I'm not good with the street name.
Oh.
That will say Bishop Richard Allen Park, and then you make it'll say, it kind of gives an arrow to go in that direction.
Is that off of Ardmore Avenue?
No, because we're
Okay.
coming into Bryn Mawr. Sorry, 227
Oh.
Brook Street in Bryn Mawr.
Oh, okay. I'll Google it. Thank you.
Sure thing. Any other thoughts?
Hello, this is Bertha Jackman.
Oh, hi, Miss Bertha. Good to hear your voice.
It's great to hear and see you, and my son is also on, and he said, we need to do more about this presentation. Like maybe at Mount Zion or something like that. Mount Zion AME Church, which is in Devon, that's my church. But I said, yes, if there's another presentation, you would have to give it because of the way that you present things. I'm sitting up here learning, and I realized that big banner on the side of 308 Market Street, I never, I passed it, and I realized I never really looked at it, and did not realize that, all the different little pieces in his story is within this banner. I do have a question. Down at the very bottom of the banner, though, there are a couple other images. Could you talk about those?
Which one? The one at the very bottom here?
Yes, the bottom left with the X across the building.
Right. So these are the 4 iterations of Mother Bethel. So this is first Bethel.
Oh, okay.
Second Bethel, third. I might have them in the wrong order. In fact, hold on one second, because when we dedicated this, I can show. So it's been pretty neat as a young person to be a part of history, if that makes sense. Because sometimes you don't realize we're just, and then I think it has also added, given that Willis is no longer with us, it has definitely added another layer of continuing to keep his memory alive, but also just how important, I mean, to be a part of that work from the beginning, and to watch the process. And then we even had like a painting party we did with young people, for different facets, as you're doing a mural piece. Okay, so here we go. Let me, and then I'm grateful that email lets you keep everything.
Yes.
I'm a pack rat even as a millennial. Okay, so this was the dedication program that we did. All right, so at square one is the globalization of the AME Church. So the AME Church, yes, starts here in Philadelphia, but to date has over 7,000 congregations and is on 5 continents. The African root, so number 2, okay, where is, right here, okay, symbolized there. 3, the African, AME Church rather, crest. So again, the cross and then the symbol of the blacksmith shop, okay. Number 4 are the 4 stages of Mother Bethel Church, okay, that there were 4 iterations. So as the congregation grew, the people built to have a bigger house to hold the congregation. And to think about what they're up against. I mean, this is, you're and to be able as a community to build and to build and to build. Then it also lifts up in number 5. So you see, okay, let me just go back to number 4. So you see Miss Bertha here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, the 4, and this is current day number 1 Mother Bethel. Okay, so that's what and I'll make sure you have this, Miss Bertha, for your file.
Thank you.
Then number 5, we have Mother Emanuel AME Church, which is the oldest Black church in the South, AME Church, founded by Henry McNeil Turner. But also many of us have come to know, due to that the massacre that took place on June 17th of the Emanuel 9. That was an African Methodist Episcopal church. And in fact, a piece of the story that has not been shared is that the group who was there, Honorable Reverend Clementa Pickney, Reverend Dr. Middleton, Dr. DePayne, others, they were just coming out of an official AME meeting that they were having at their local congregation, which when I have that meeting, we call it our quarterly conference when our superiors come to check on us. And usually you're so drained, Will, after the meeting, you just want to go home. But they wanted to stay for Bible study. And that also what made out, in addition to the 9, Reverend Clementa's wife and younger daughter were in the office. And it was one other person. Sometimes we don't also lift up and think about the survivors. Then there are the 4 horsemen, so the pillars of the AME Church: Richard Allen, William Powell Quinn, Daniel Alexander Payne, who was the first bishop of the AME Church, who had seminary training, and Henry McNeil Turner. And then President Obama, number 7, when he came to one of our general conferences and was prayed over by a host of bishops who were present. Then number 8, the picture that we've been is when we're looking at the young Richard Allen, okay? Number 9, the second wife of Richard Allen, his first wife, her name was Flora. Number 10, Absalom Jones, so they walk out together, but then they just go their separate ways, but it's suggested that they do keep some level of relationship. Number 11, the Great Walkout of St. George's, November 1787. 12, representation of Richard Allen, his brothers as child slaves, right here. 13, the yellow fever epidemic of 1793. 14, Jarena Lee, whose birthday is reported to be February the 11th, the first licensed preacher. And Richard Allen that wasn't so quite convinced that she was called to preach, but he had forgotten where he was in his sermon, and she picked it up and finished preaching it. And then he said, you know what? Okay, I'm going to give her a license to preach. And she was posthumously made a reverend at our bicentennial convention in 2016. 15, this is the present day Mother Bethel congregation, okay? 16, Rosa Parks. 17, symbols of slavery. 18, the cross. 19, the anvil. And then 20, the original motto of the AME Church, God our Father, Christ our Redeemer, man our brother. So how art helps to project. And so if you take this against even Willis's piece commissioned to represent Richard's coming on the main line, it really puts it in another type of, aside from, it's a beautiful piece, but there's story and history there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, sure thing. And I'll make sure you get that.
Wonderful.
Any other?
This is Kathy again. You had mentioned that Richard Allen was married twice. Did he have any children?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. It's reported that the young Richard, so I guess be Richard Jr., was the secretary at the organization conference of the AME Church in April 1816. So also lets us know the level of, I'm going to say, wealth and prestige, right? Because to be able to read and write was a big deal. And the fact that a child, but again, it also clues us in on the type of access that Richard Allen had. Also, Richard Allen was one of the foremost landowners in early Black Philadelphia. In fact, he held the deed on Mother Bethel Church. In fact, there's a storyline where they, the congregation and him, like, you know, the legal system had to get involved because he would not turn. They had to literally buy him out, if you will. So he was a very shrewd businessman. He knew how to wheel and deal. But think about who he's hanging around, who he's exposed to, and also being very strong in his convictions. And there are current day descendants by the name of Studevan, Studevan. And there are, I know one is probably definitely about in their late 80s or 90s. And they still, have a relationship with the denomination.
Are they in the area, in the Philadelphia area?
Not that I know of. I think it's more so like a Maryland type of DMV area. Is kind of what I've surmised. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
Did you, in my readings, did you want to mention about how Bishop Allen, how he used to preach at St. George's at 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning?
Sure. 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, absolutely. Because that was the only time slot that he would be given. And what St. George's saw, that he had a following, that they followed. I mean, think about it. For him to be able to walk out and start a movement. Now, we know there had to have been folk that stayed, but there was a vast majority, I would suggest, went with. But to not fully, and to say, they were, in many ways, were doing their due diligence to be there, right? It is by their money that the balcony gets built at St. George's. And you're bothering me while I'm praying? Can this wait till after this, and then we can, okay, but maybe was he getting too big for his bridges? Is that a terrible thing for a Black man to have that much power and people following? And what's interesting is that when he walks out, him and Absalom Jones, when we look at the polity of the AME Church, when we look at the organizational structure, he took everything that was Methodist and brought it to the AME Church just about. There's not a whole lot of difference as it relates to how it operates fundamentally. So he didn't have it. In fact, he was convinced that in order to preach to people, especially the slaves, it needed to be simple. It needed to be nothing complicated, that there needed to be order. And so he brings that. So this was it was nothing about doctrinal. It was nothing about who God is or how to deal with communion, right? It was about treatment. And so we're just going to go under our own vine and fig tree. Thus the birth of the African Methodist Episcopal Church.
I don't think I've ever heard it put that way before.
Okay. I don't know if that's good or bad.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. Thank you for that.
Mhm. And I think when you think about him, not only as a religious figure, but he's a mover in the show. I mean, the first Black press publications come out of the AME Church, the Free African Society, right? Who Du Bois would say 100 years later was what, and I mean, and Du Bois, it says in fact that the Black church is the greatest gift to Black people, and then goes on to suggest that the AME Church is that gift. And at the work of the Free African Society, and when we think about mutual aid, and we think about the many iterations even in this current time as we've navigated pandemic, how small organizations or just families have just banded together to make it through this very, very tough place in our lives. But you got to have resources to do that. You got to have know-how. And Richard had that.
Interesting.
The other thoughts?
Did you, as far as the 1816 conference, could you go a little more into details about that, about which churches were represented and where it took place?
Mm-hmm. So this conference, the idea was that you think about there were the communities of Black folk that were popping up, and we're really relegated to the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at Baltimore, we're looking at Philadelphia, we're looking at even Southern New Jersey, okay? And they come together what's called the Christmas Conference, I believe in Baltimore, Maryland, and they organize. So you bring up, people, almost like a delegate type of situation, and come and form, okay? Because you had other types of iterations, even as far as Brooklyn, New York. One of our churches now, the Bridge Street UWME Church, which could not find a pastor, so they said, well, can the AME send us a pastor? So they're in the mix.
Are we back on?
I think he needs to put us back on live.
Okay.
We're ready.
Okay, we're ready to go? We are back to the meeting to finish up the agenda here. Tammy, I just wanted to say I thought that was an absolutely fabulous presentation. What an interesting piece of Radnor history. I mean, I'm sure that many, if not most, Radnor residents are entirely unaware of this, and it's as interesting as anything else about Radnor's history. So I'm really glad we were able to do this.
And what we'll do is we'll get a copy of the recording, and we'll see if we can rebroadcast that and put that out, as well as some of the images that were shown there too. A couple of them we do have out on the website already for the event webpage, of course, that's set up. And we'll make sure some of that is also spread through social media, so folks have an opportunity to continue to learn and watch.
I think
she did a fabulous job.
Yeah, she did an outstanding
Reverend
job.
Cavanis is great, and what a great presentation.
Excellent. I'm really glad we were able to do that. It's a very creative idea. Thank you, Tammy. We left off, were there any further reports, Tammy, or had you gotten through all of them?
Just, I guess, just a couple quick things I wanted to note about some of the upcoming There's a couple scout projects that are going to be taking place that I just wanted to mention. There's going to be an extension to the boardwalk down in Skunk Hollow, as well as the uncovering and restoration of a walkway that extends beyond the grotto behind the mansion.
Right.
It's approximately, I think, 140 to 190 feet. So there's a couple of really good projects that are coming up. We also have somewhat of an update on the Enke Park Playground project. We know it's going to be happening in the spring. We also know that our company is ready to begin as soon as we give them the green light on demolition, recognizing that it's going to start to take some time to rip out the existing surfacing and get started on that project. So as soon as I have an identified timeline on that, I'll let you guys know. And then the hope is that once the weather is conducive, they can get the poured-in-place surfacing going and hopefully truncate the time a little bit more that the park will actually be closed. So we're working on that. We also have some impacts coming up to the North Wayne Park and Cowan Park parking lots that are going to be restored, particularly with some stormwater management projects that are underway by the township engineer, and those surfaces will be restored with porous asphalt that's anticipated. So once we have an idea of what that's going to look like and the timelines, obviously, you know, we're coming upon spring and impacts to parking lots are not ideal, but once we have those, we'll let everybody know. But I just wanted to give a heads up on them, so we are going to have some continued work going on in and around the parks. And then I know we're also going to have our township engineer attend one of our upcoming meetings to give an update on West Wayne Preserve and Friends of Radnor Trails Park, where we have a flood reduction project that's in final design, which I believe is completed in terms of design, but is about ready to go to bid. So be able to give the board some background on that so you're aware of what's going on. Other than that, the rest of my updates are on the agenda under old business.
And let's move on to Odoricio. Update on park improvements and planning.
We had a special dedicated meeting on January 12th with the Parks and Recreation Board and some members of the community. We heard a lot of the same things in terms of desires, wants, and wishes for the park. I'm not going to go back through all of those, but I know we're keeping copious notes on what we're hearing and what we're learning. But what we did learn is that we thought, based on some of the lower attendance that happened at the meeting, we were going to get a survey going, which is out and about currently. It's in our township newsletters. It's in social media. We have a couple residents that I've been able to set up with iPads so that they could go around and meet with residents to try and get feedback and information. So we know a lot of people are working on completing that. We have a posted QR code at the park in the park kiosk. So if someone wants to walk over there and scan that, they can go right to the survey and fill it out. And we'll continue circulating those at all of our upcoming events and activities that we have happening, so folks have an opportunity to fill out the survey and tell us what they want to see at the park. And looking forward to continuing our relationship with the community, encouraging people to sign up for the e-notifications. That way we can continue to have some good dialogue and generate some good feedback. I've had some contact with the Radnor Township Civic Association board members, a couple of our musicians that perform on our Odoricio Music and Movie Night that's coming up. They're helping us as well to circulate the survey and get it out to as many people as possible. On that, I just wanted to announce those two events that are going to be coming up in the Odoricio neighborhood. One, the Odoricio Music and Movie Night, scheduled for Saturday, July 8th. In the park, and then our Unity in the Community block party that goes along Highland Avenue, scheduled for Saturday, August 26th. So planning is well underway for both of those great events. So we're excited about the park project. I think we talked about it prior. We have a grant for planning and putting together designs. So I think once we get through our public process and we have a little bit more focused idea of what folks want to see there, we'll take an opportunity to maybe set some guidelines and put together some priorities and engage a designer to prepare a concept that everybody can take a look at. So with that, I mean, unless you have any questions about that project, just continuing to move along.
Yeah, let's go to Enke.
Enke Lights, as we know, was presented here at the Parks and Recreation Board in December. recommended and moved along to the Board of Commissioners in January. We had a meeting presentation to the Board of Commissioners on the lights and the proposed installation of not only the field lights on Enki B, but the lighting on the batting cages as well as the transitional lighting to get to the parking lots. So there's a detailed presentation that was made in January. If anyone wants to go back and look at the recording of that, it is available. And then this upcoming Monday night, the Board of Commissioners will evaluate a resolution to approve a memorial of understanding, memorandum of understanding, an agreement on how the lights will be installed, maintained, operated in terms of the relationship with Radnor Wayne Little League. So that has been prepared for the board and is on their agenda for Monday night.
Great. Anything from the board on any of that? Willows Park Preserve, concerns about dogs in Willows Park and the trails. Update on that, Tammy?
My only update on that is I think we're gearing towards a focused meeting in April,
Yep.
which I think we have a lot of work to discuss on that and come up with an objective. That way we can get that out and circulated to the public. So I'll be looking to some of the board members for that, as well as Willows Park Preserve, if there's anything they want to chime in on that as well.
Okay. Everybody? 2023 Radnor Township Capital Budget Parks and Facilities and Park Impact Fund Project allocation. Update on that, Tammy?
So this was just an item I wanted to keep on here, more so just to ask if the board has any questions. Right now, we have the playground project at Enki Park that's been allocated out of the Park Impact Fund, which was a recommendation that this board had and then was forwarded along to the Board of Commissioners, in which we authorized the project for the Enki Park surfacing replacement, sunshades, and roofing structures. So that was the project I just spoke about, where we anticipate it's going to get up and running here in the early spring. It's going to have the park closed, the playground closed. And we continue to look at our capital budget and look to members of the community, the board, for input, projects, things like that we want to see. We have a plan that I know we have looked at and we'll be looking at soon. I've been actually working to update the 2024 project list that we have that I know we took a look at last year and continue building on that. So although we don't have a direct capital plan in place for this year for funding additional parks beyond what's already been funded out of the Park Impact Fund, we know we have a list that still sits there that is always a living, breathing document that evolves every year. So it'll be something that we'll want to continue to look at as we move further into 2023.
Any board input? Parks and Rec Board members, Park Steward Program, does anybody have anything to report on the parks that they steward? Tammy, I think I told you, the only thing I noticed on the trail behind the willows, like just as you are entering it from the upper parking lot, is major beech tree limb blocking the trail, which I don't think is a major impediment, but I think the next time the crew's anywhere out there, that should be, an easy enough job to take care of.
We'll get them to take a look at that
Yeah.
as soon as they get a chance.
Again, I don't think it's impeding anybody, but, it's there. Okay. I don't see any public, so I don't think we're going to have any public participation. We do have a quorum, so we actually can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Any second? Okay. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.